We're talking today about the divine beloved and the isness of all life, and that we can experience that same love that we feel with another person, with the divine, feel that incredible love light touching us in our hearts, in our mind, in our eyes, in our smile. Humanly, we might be, everyone here is on a different place today about where you are with romantic love. You might be in this wonderful new relationship and it's feeling so good and you love to experience it. It might be a relationship you've been in a long time and it's just sort of, maybe there's a little bit of a routine to it. It's still deep love, but it's not quite fresh and new as when we're in the springtime of a new relationship. You might have just ended a relationship and might be feeling really sad. You might not be haven't been in a relationship in a long time, and you might feel that longing for a relationship. So in this wonderful journey of life, we have these different ways of being in a relationship and how we're relating to it. But the idea is that when we turn all that love towards the divine, which is the source of every relationship that we're in or ever have been or ever will be, we have the potential of actually being in that feeling of blissful love all of the time. And that's why you have all these spiritual masters who are just saying, love, love, love the divine, because when you do, I guarantee you, you will be in a state much better than you are humanly, because humanly, it's hard to stay and maintain that divine bliss, that feeling of just being in love. So for those of you who know me, those who are new, I have different statements that sort of keep me, that I just live with, because they just feed my soul. And one of those statements comes from Reverend Michael Beckwith, which is, court the invisible until it becomes more real than the chair in which we're sitting. I love that, because courting is something you do with someone you love. I'm in love with you, so we court, we get to know one another. The invisible is hard to really get to know intimately because it's invisible. So it takes time. It's not something that is overnight. It's not a one-night stand. It's a daily showing up and courting that which we can't see, taste, touch, hear, or smell until it becomes more real to us than the chairs in which we are sitting. More real to us than this room. More real than our jobs. More real than our paycheck. More real than whatever's happening in the conditions and circumstances of our life. More real than this planet Earth and everything that we think about and talk about that's happening on this planet Earth that takes up our conversation. Is more real than any of that to court that loving presence, this divine beloved, with our whole heart, body, mind, and soul. And the idea with courting the beloved is that it's courting us at the same time. So there's this two coming into this grand unification. So you still get to oneness, but you get there through this deep and abiding love, where we can feel that presence of being in love in a state of bliss constantly. If any of you have been reading along with us in the Houston Smith's book of Hinduism and the world's religions, he refers to several times Ramakrishna. Ramakrishna was a saint in Hinduism. They call him guru, in the 1800s. And his way of loving the divine was as a mother. And so he was just in love with the divine mother and gave his whole body, soul, and mind. He was on fire with this love, and it filled him. And what happens when you get filled with love is it changes you. You don't operate in the same way. But then he started feeling, well, maybe this is just the mother of Hinduism. Maybe I would like to think that she's in all religions all over the planet, but I don't know that. So he started practicing all the other religions to find his divine mother, to find the thing that he was most in love with in all the religions, different paths of the religion. So he totally gave himself. So he's known for this incredible, passionate devotion to the infinite and eternal one. Sometimes I think we get so spiritually sophisticated that we forget that this is a way to live that brings such incredible fulfillment and joy. That we can feel it even before we have even direct contact, just in giving ourselves in love to anything with our whole heart, body, mind, and soul. It starts to open us to discover, open our hearts and our minds to discover that which we never before could experience. It fulfills something inside of us that is impossible to articulate, but we know that we know that we know that it's in our heart. I think for so many people, when I talk with you, there is this wonderful love. It's this love that motivates you. It's this love that you feel for the divine. You know it's there, and it's palpable, and there's this longing to get closer and more intimate with it. Courting the divine beloved. the deepest and most fulfilling relationship we can have. Then there's the isness of all life. That's more principle. We also have a lot of that in our evolved, progressive spiritual world these days. That's where we learn. See, when we get into the emotional aspect of it, it can feel a little bit more temperamental. We get a little bit more emotional around the whole thing. And I was thinking, in this past week, we read in chapter 3 of Reign of Gold. I don't think I ever said it. We're reading 2 chapters a month in Reign of Gold. So we read chapters 1 and 2 in January, 3 and 4 for this month. And he's describing spring, and I love it because it's lush. He's talking about he's such a good writer, and everything is green and more green, and there's thousands. I don't know if you've ever been where butterflies are migrating. Hundreds of thousands of butterflies land in the Box Canyon. Hundreds of parrots. I always think of parrots as singular. All these parrots there, and new parrots are being birthed, and wildflowers are everybody, and this Box Canyon is filled with fragrance. And because they're so close to the earth, the people who are living in this Box Canyon still have so much of that indigenous vibrational spirituality that everything that they're feeling and thinking is connected with everything else, all the plants and the animals and surrounding them. So in this point, their love is so alive within them. In this chapter, you just feel it's radiant with love. But what happens when the circumstances change? So in the evolutionary process of our humanity, I think one of the things humanity's tried to do is try to figure out why does this great power, they feel the power of nature. So many of you say that you feel the presence of God in nature. Why does it change? Why do we have all those fires in Santa Rosa? Why are these things happening? Why are there great droughts? And so human beings from the beginning of time have tried to answer that. And one of their answers was this very human God, which they fell in love with, but now this presence must be angry with them. So that starts to become a challenge with being in this relationship with the divine beloved, is we start projecting, it's a parent. It's like my mom or dad, or it's like my beloved, and now it's punishing me, and now it's rewarding me. So we start projecting our human qualities. When we're in a true divine beloved relationship, it transcends that. But on the journey there, as human beings, we got confused along the way and thought the divine beloved was actually human and projected our human qualities. So that's where these principles came along. The impersonal nature of God starts to come along and say, we need to have a sense that there is that which never changes. It's not moody. It's not a person. It's a principle. It an isness. The isness. It just is. It's absolute and unchanging. It is always present. It doesn't come. It doesn't go. It doesn't give sometimes. It doesn't take away sometimes. It's not punishing you. It's not rewarding it. It is always love. It is always peace. It is ever-present beauty and harmony and grace all of the time and beyond all time. That's the principle of it, the isness of it. In Buddhism, they call it the ground of all beings, suchness. In fact, Buddhism has very little of the personal face of God, and it's much more impersonal in many ways. In Hinduism, the whole journey of today's talk is both and. That's the divine beloved and the isness. We're also going to talk about a little bit about karma and grace. It's interesting that as I was with this topic, on Facebook, there was an integral Facebook group, and they were getting into this whole topic of the impersonal and personal God. And then another person was saying on there, if you could only be logical or only be emotional, which one would you choose? And the thing that strikes me is how much we get into either or, and how much we limit ourselves with either or. And so Hinduism says this is what I love about Hinduism. It acknowledges that it's everything. It is everything. It is the impersonal and it is the personal. And they acknowledge that some people are going to be more drawn to the personal and some people are going to be more drawn to the impersonal, but it's all the same thing and we're relating it to it differently and it's all good. And what I would say is not only are we drawn to both, we actually are drawn to one over the other, but we're also drawn to both. We want to experience both of these. So as I'm looking out amongst all of you who I love so much, I know that you experience the divine as both of these. I know you've had those experiences where it's very loving and intimate, but at the same time, you know the isness of it. You know the ever-present, unchanging witness. So it's that witness that's watching you right now. There's a part of you that can just watch your body sitting in your chair right now. It's been watching you since you were a kid. It's been watching you since you were a teenager and an adult. And though humanly we've been changing since I was 5 years old to when I was born to now, this thing that's been watching me has never changed. It's ever present. That's the isness. It's always here. It's here right now. That's the power of now that we hear in Eckhart Tolle. It's this ever-presence that we can tap into any moment. And so we can go from that to the loving the divine beloved. You can see sort of that shift. The isness to now identifying as my human self, loving the infinite self within me. It's just like these beautiful shifts that we can make. And at any time, we are drawn to different practices. So Hinduism honors both of them, and they both have incredible value. The key with all of this, though, is to see it in life. How does the impersonal God and the personal face of God show up in our everyday life? So I was reading chapter 3, and I'm like, oh, here's a wonderful example. So this book, Rain of Gold, there's a family. It's Lupe. She's 6, and she's with her family in the Box Canyon. They're very, very poor. They have this man named Don Benito had found gold in the canyon. This is based on a true story, by the way. And he was so excited by it, and he said he had gold fever, and he's telling everybody, and so you start telling everybody there's all this gold, people are going to start hearing it. Eventually, the Americans make their way down and start mining the gold. In the end of chapter 2 and going into chapter 3, Don Benito has found another area in the canyon with a little gold, but now he's like, I'm not going to tell anyone now. And so he's got Lupe's brother, Victorino, to help him start mining it just a little bit. So he's feeling great. He's got some gold. He knows there's a ton of gold on the way, and nobody else knows about it. He feels that he's an older man. I'm going to finally have some money. And it's spring, the wildflowers, the fragrance, people, the co-creation is happening, procreation. And so he's feeling all of that springtime love energy, and he's out walking, and he sees this beautiful girl, young lady twirling around in her white dress, and he falls completely madly in love, and he knows she's going to fall in love with him because he's rich. He's got all this gold, so he goes and starts telling her, and Victorino is like, no, we're not telling anyone, remember? So he takes her to his mother, Doña Guadalupe. I love this because usually it's in reverse. It's we always depict the woman as the one, oh, I'm madly in love, but in this case it's reversed. So he's alive in love. He's feeling the dynamic energy of being in love, and he's like, why wouldn't I tell anybody? This is great. I have the gold. Of course she's going to marry me. I'm so excited. Everything was all going to work out. Of course she's going to fall in love with me. This is perfect. There's no problems. Why can't you see that everything is love? Because when we're awake in love, all we see is love. Remember do you remember that when you're falling? That moments of falling in love, everything that you see is love. All those things that used to irritate you don't irritate you anymore. Everything is beautiful. In fact, they say the two qualities of God are love and beauty. And Thomas Troward said the reason why it's beauty is because God is always attracted to itself. There's never a moment where God isn't magnetized to itself. And that's what we have that feeling when we're in love. So that's what he was feeling. Everything was working out. He was in love. Everything was beautiful. No problems. She's the calm, steady one at this point. She's the impersonal face of God. She doesn't berate him. She doesn't tell him he's wrong. She doesn't react emotionally back. No, you can't do that. You're going to give away. She goes, oh, I understand. I hear that you're in love. What? So how can we serve you in getting these needs met without telling everybody that we have found this gold? And they have this little conversation, and I'm like, this is a conversation between the impersonal face of God and the personal face of God. And it was beautiful. And they came to this, at least for chapter 3, this wonderful understanding of how they were going to move forward, and they moved into alignment. The thing with the both and is because we have so many divisions, we find ways to separate ourselves from other people all of the time, and religion does this. Religion says this is the right path, or this is the right way. And the more we start to understand that these are all right ways and we start acknowledging it, those bridges start to happen. Those marriages start to happen, and that was a wonderful example of the impersonal face of God and the personal face of God coming together and acknowledging and seeing with each other without condemning the other person. It was such a beautiful example. So in your everyday life, How is that impersonal face of God and the personal face of God showing up in your own life, in your relationships with other people at work? Do you see it? It doesn't have to be called forth. Someone doesn't have to be sitting there talking about their religious or spiritual path, just in how they're behaving, how you're behaving, where am I coming from? Am I coming from that cool witness, mindfulness, meditation? Am I coming from this passionate love? Where's that other person coming from? How can we meet each other? When you're reading stories, books, movies, film, it's everywhere. It's happening all of the time. And that's what I want us to be looking at through this whole year, is this impersonal and personal face of God, because it's everything, right? We keep saying it's one power, one presence. It's everything. So it's alive and dynamic all of the time. It's just whether we're seeing it and consciously acknowledging it. Joel Goldsmith says, the power and the presence of pure spirit is everywhere all of the time, except where it goes unrecognized. It's as if it's not even there. So we're the ones to bring it forth, to call it forth, to consciously recognize it. So another aspect of this either or both and is with karma and grace. Karma actually is a little bit of the impersonal side, and grace is a little bit on the personal side. One of the main tenets, cores, foundation of Hinduism is this idea of karma. And karma, as you may or may not know, is about the law of cause and effect. The way they talk about it is a little bit differently than the way we talk about it, because their idea of time is so much vaster than our idea of time. One day in the life of God is like, I used to have the number memorized. I don't have it memorized anymore, but it's like something like 3 million or days in a human being. So for them, time is really, 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 really long. There's many cycles that we go through. So karma is about your next life. It's not what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't change my thinking and I'm going to change my life in the next day. It's everything that I'm doing this entire lifetime. I'm building up karma. I'm building up an energetic vibration to who I am. And there's positive energetic vibration, there's negative vibration, and that's going to impact how I'm birthed in the next life. So they spend a lot of time thinking and experiencing what's your karma going to be like for your next life. Recognizing at the same time as we have is that this law of cause and effect is happening even in this life. So as we begin to shift how we think and feel about things in this life, we have it in the Old Testament. So the Old Testament, as you sow, so shall you reap. That's the law of cause and effect. So that's why I want to look at it. It's in all the religions. We're going to keep returning to this idea of karma and grace, because it exists in all of them, but different religions highlight them differently. So in Judaism, they definitely have this law of cause and effect, but I think most of us, when we think of Judaism, we think of the personal God, the God in the sky who's very personal and in a relationship with Judaism. So it leans more to the personal, but they also have the law. The law is everywhere. And this is what Hinduism teaches, and it's absolute. And that was something that I just read this past week in the World's Religions book, and it made more sense to me. We do a self-realization group based on Paramahansa Yogananda's teachings, and we're almost on a year now. And it was interesting because he really teaches this law of cause and effect. Everything is a law, and you have to change your habits, and you've got to use the right thinking because you've got to change everything. And he did a little section. His job when he came over here, Yogananda, was to integrate the East and West generally and integrate Christianity and Hinduism specifically. And it was funny because he did this one little lesson on forgiveness, and I'm thinking, I don't think he really gets forgiveness. And we'll go more into that later, but this whole idea that we can, through forgiveness, change cause from the past. Like, if you've done something bad, it's forgiven, and then that cause is, in essence, deleted. I don't think he really fully grasped that because he's so anchored in this idea of law, that you don't get to wiggle out of your karma. You don't get to wiggle out of the causes that you've created. In Hinduism, you actually can break free from this cycle, and that's enlightenment. So they do feel that spiritual masters do free themselves from karma. They do free themselves from all the effects of karma because they're so enlightened. But they don't try to fool themselves and say, just by thinking certain things that everything is fine now, that you can actually change the energy of karma. That every human being, as long as we're still operating on this earth, is responsible for our thoughts and our choices. We are still responsible for the way we're showing up in the world. As long as we're in this human body, I have to be careful about what I'm thinking. I have to be careful what I'm putting out there because it will have its effect. And it's only, so they're saying, they don't want to pretend that doesn't matter anymore. And that's important because we're also reading Joel Goldsmith's book, and the main essence of his book is about moving from karma to grace. And if for any of you who've been reading the book at all, he really pits them against each other. Karma's bad, we want to live totally from grace. But if you actually read the book, the reading today, it's like in order to get the grace that he's talking about and live from this higher law, you have to give up all desire. You have to give up all fear. You have to let this whole world go. So even though it seems more accessible, and he's not saying you have to become a spiritually enlightened guru, he's also saying it is a very high state of consciousness. And so when we acknowledge that it's both and, that we can have these incredible moments of grace, when we're totally surrendered and we're allowing the Spirit to flow through us, whether that's when you're playing music or doing an art project or playing sports or doing a project at work and you're just out, you're not in your own mind, you're just allowing the Spirit to flow through you. I know you've all had those moments. That's grace. You're just out of the way. You're bloated, as Emerson said, you're getting your bloated nothingness out of the way and just allowing Spirit to move through us. And to live that as a whole way of being takes a life devoted to knowing your divine beloved and courting your divine beloved. So every single day, every moment of every day, you're just thinking the divine. There's a prayer that Yogananda talks about God, God, God in the morning, God when you're eating breakfast, God through the day, and he goes through the whole day in the end. So that's total 100% devotion. Oneness. We were talking about just staying in that oneness, just being totally devoted, oneness. If you're going to do mindfulness meditation, that's all I'm doing all day long. I'm just witnessing. That's the place where you start moving yourself out of the law of cause and effect. That's when you start transcending the law of this world. But the both and is important, and that's what I want to keep emphasizing. As much as Joel was talking about this idea of grace, karma is always there too, law and cause and effect. Until we're absolutely free, we want to be honest with ourselves and still show up responsibly. We can't, like Ramana Krishna, who I was talking about earlier, who was so devoted, he was not part of humanity, he did not act like anyone you knew. He didn't function in the way we function. He had transcended and was living a life, and anyone who knew him at that time knew he was living in a life that was completely different from the normal human laws of existence. It looked crazy, it looks eccentric, but that's because he wasn't operating at this world anymore. But most of us are still operating in this world, and so we want to embrace our teaching. For those of you who don't know, the Centers for Spiritual Living, we talk a lot about the law, about co-creating, about being conscious what our thoughts are, about participating in this law of the universe that is always happening. We're surrounded by this law. The way we talk about it is there's a soil, and the soil is everywhere. It's a metaphor. And that every thought that we have, every belief system, as you believe, so shall it be done unto you. As you sow, so shall you reap. That we're putting into the soil never says no. So if we can reap, if we think bad thoughts, we're going to have bad effects, or bad beliefs. If we have good thoughts, we're going to have good results. That's it in its very simplistic form. I think there's much more depth to it, because it's really about who we're becoming. Like I said, we're building up karmic energy for when we die. So it's really about who are we becoming vibrationally, which is why Yogananda talks so much about habits, because we're habits, and our habits are primarily serving our own awakefulness and other wakefulness, or are they serving density and constriction? And what they're teaching is that both will bring you free. The more you start to become awake and wanting to work with your habits to become freer and freer and be a place of great karma, of great energy and vibration, you're going to be simultaneously waking up to the truth of who and what you really are, and have all that energy is going to start waking you up to the transcendent. So they ultimately always work together. Joel Goldsmith worked on the law, the thing that he tends to put down in this book, Thunder of Silence. He spent 16 years really anchoring in that law before he really fully anchored into the grace. So I talk about being the chief executive officers, the CEOs of our spiritual paths, and we're looking at the impersonal and the personal face of God. We're looking at our own life. Are we participating consciously with the cause and effect of our world? It's in every teaching, every world religions, there's constantly this law of co-creativity, karma, that we are involved in. How much are you paying attention to that in your own life? So many people have said, I don't know who originally said it, but the fact that we don't know that it's happening doesn't mean it's not happening. That this law is happening, it's happening right now. What you're thinking right now is impacting your own interior world, not just externally. We always think about it exteriorly. It's impacting your own interior world. If you're thinking nothing but negative thoughts, it's going to hurt you most importantly, most precariously. So how are you treating yourself with your thoughts? Where are your thoughts and your energies? All this is part of this wonderful cosmic co-creation that we're involved in. And then lastly, where are we in grace? Where are we experiencing total surrender, where we've just let go? We've let go of having to have a situation be this way or that way. We have completely let go of our attachments that my life has to be this way and it definitely can't be that way. We just have let go and surrendered. Do you experience those moments in your life, in your relationship with the divine, in your relationship with your friends, in your family, with your work, with your own personal way you show up? Are you living in that place of total surrender? And you see how those two things interact within your own path. I want to end today with grace. Because when we're in grace, when we feel those moments of just total surrender, when we feel that presence moving through us, that is the feeling of being in love. And today's all about love, baby. And we feel love, we feel bliss, we feel joy. And so how do we get to that place? How do we get to that place of just letting everything go and feeling the infinite love intelligence of the universe filling us to overflowing? And so I'm going to end with a quote. My favorite quote. Well, no, not my favorite. One of my favorite quotes. I have multiple. I know you all do. How are you all doing? You're very quiet. I start walking backwards, but I feel very far away. Come up here. Okay, so I'm sure many of you have heard it, but remind yourself, this is living in grace. This is what it feels like. This is what's available to us on Wednesday. I think it's Valentine's Day is Wednesday. You don't have to be anybody to be feeling this feeling of mad, passionate love. You don't need to do anything. In fact, you do not need to leave your room. Remain sitting at your table and listen. Do not even listen. Simply wait. Be quiet, still, and solitary. The world will freely offer itself to you to be unmasked. It has no choice. It will roll in ecstasy at your feet. That's grace. Letting it go. So let's pray. So we're just letting everything go. Letting everything go. There's nothing to hold on to. Because we are not making this presence arrive. It has already been here. It has always been here, since before time began. And it will be here after time ends. It is not becoming enlightened. It is already fully enlightened. It is already fully and completely itself. It is alive and awake as each and every one of us in this room right here, right now, whoever can hear my voice, it is already alive, awake, and enlightened. It knows itself perfectly. It is fearless. It is afraid of nothing. For it is everything. It is not lacking anything. It is the fullness of all life and beyond all life. It longs for nothing. It seeks for nothing. It doesn't need to change anything. It doesn't need to fix anything. It doesn't need to do anything. It simply already is in all of its power and all of its glory and all of its love and all of its joy and ecstasy. It simply is right here, right now, in the midst of us and as us, in, through, and as each and every one of us. So we let go of even trying to connect with it and just accept that it's us, just as we are in this moment. Whatever we're thinking, it's those thoughts. Whatever we're feeling, it's those thoughts and more. It's those feelings and more. It's this physical presence and more. We just enjoy consciously recognizing it. And if we so choose, we turn our attention toward it as the finite to the infinite, as the small self to the infinite self, and we turn over and we say, Divine Beloved, you are my everything. You are my breath. You are every atom and cell of my body and so much more. You are everything I've ever experienced in my life. You are all my relationships. You are every feeling and emotion I've ever had. You're every thought I've ever had. You are everything here and now. And I give myself knowing that even as you are my everything, you are so much beyond anything I could ever imagine with my mind, to my thoughts. You are transcendent, and I turn my entire being over to you. I love you. I love you. I love you. I hold nothing back. I give you all that I am. I hide nothing. I hide nothing. I let myself fully be seen and wrapped and enveloped in your love even now. I let you take me and hold me and embrace me and care for me and teach me and guide me, to consume me in your passionate love. All the pain and suffering and separation that I've ever felt, I surrender it over to you. I hand it over to you, my divine beloved, and allow you to carry me and to transform me in your light and in your love. I let go into this infinite oceanic love beyond my wildest imagination. I love you. I love you. I love you. I trust you with my whole heart, body, mind, and soul. I give my whole soul to you. And I know that even as I give everything over to you, you give everything of yours to me. All that you have is mine, and all that I have is yours. We are in this forever, passionate, loving, infinite, oceanic embrace that transcends time and space, and yet includes all that I am here on this small little earth in a small little point in time and space. And how grateful I am, how humbled I am, how in awe I am. This is bliss, this is heaven, and there's nowhere else I'd rather be than in your arms, in your love, for all eternity. And in this, I know that I am whole, perfect, and complete. Nothing is missing. Nothing is lacking. I am that I am. All that has ever been and ever will be, I am. Knowing this, seeing this, feeling this, anchored in, through, and as this, I release this word into the law of the universe, knowing that as it is spoken, it is done. And I invite all of us as the I am to say,
so it is. So it is. So it is. Amen.